one breast cancer drug costs Americans over $16,000 per bottle, but the same drug from the same factory, manufactured by the same company, is 1/6 that price in Australia and 1/10 that price in Sweden. 1/10 for the identical product. A common asthma drug costs almost $500 here in America, but costs less than $40 in the United Kingdom. So $40 in the United Kingdom, which is where this gentleman told me he paid a small amount for his shot. But think of that. So $40 versus $500 here. That's not even bad. There are much worse examples. And the weight loss drug, Ozempic, costs 10 times more in the United States than in the rest of the developed world. 10 times more. Why? Why? What did we do? Suckers. Our country has the highest drug prices anywhere in the world by sometimes a factor of 5, 6, 7, 8 times. It's not like they're slightly higher. They're 6, 7, 8 times. There are even cases of 10 times higher. So that you go 10 times more expensive for the same drug, that's big numbers. Even though the United States is home to only 4% of the world's population, pharmaceutical companies make more than 2/3 of their profits in America. So think of that. With 4% of the population, the pharmaceutical companies make most of their money, most of their profits from America. That's not a good thing. Now, I think, by the way, I have great respect for these companies and for the people that run them. I really do. And I think they did one of the greatest jobs in history for their company, convincing people for many years that this was a fair system. And nobody really understood why, but I figured it out. For years, pharmaceutical and drug companies have said that research and development costs were what they are, and for no reason whatsoever. They had to be borne by America alone. Not anymore, they don't. This means American patients were effectively subsidizing socialist healthcare systems in Germany, in all parts of the European Union. They were the toughest of all. They were nasty. And I see that. I see that with trade, too. European Union is, in many ways, nastier than China. Okay? And we've just started with them. Oh, they'll come down a lot. You watch. We have all the cards. They treated us very unfairly. They sell us 13 million cars. We sell them none. They sell us their agricultural products. We sell them virtually none. They don't take our products. That gives us all the cards, and very unfair. So they're going to have to pay more for health care, and we're going to have to pay less. That's all it is. And believe it or not, because it's really the world we're talking about, not just the European Union, but because it's the world, the numbers are for the healthcare company not as bad as you would think. They'll make the same. I think the healthcare companies should make pretty much the same money. I really don't believe they should be affected very much, because it's just a redistribution of wealth. It's a redistribution where it could be the same top line, but it's going to be distributed differently. Europe's going to have to pay a little bit more. The rest of the world's going to have to pay a little bit more, and America's going to pay a lot less. Again, because it's a much smaller population than when you think of the whole world. So basically what we're doing is equalizing. There's a new word that I came up with, which I think is probably the best word. We're going to equalize, where we're all going to pay the same. We're going to pay what Europe's going to pay. We're going to all pay. Now, there may be some countries in dire need, and I would be willing to sacrifice that and help them. But it's called most favored nation. We are going to pay the lowest price there is in the world. We will get whoever is paying the lowest price. That's the price that we're going to get. So remember that. So we're no longer paying 10 times more than another country. Whoever is paying the lowest price, we will look at that price and we will say that's the price we're going to pay. I mean, I've gotten to know this system so well. And I don't think it's fair that it benefits Obamacare. Obamacare is a failure. It's not a good health care. It works. I made it work. I had an obligation to make it work. or an obligation to let it die. I chose that we had to make it work. I had to make it as good as possible. And I had a choice. I could have let it fail or make it as good as possible. As good as possible means it was still not very good, but it survived. And we did the right thing. But this makes everything work. And I don't want to have a bad form of health care work because of the fact I was able to cut drug prices by 80 or 90%. So we're going to maybe come up with something, and for less money, which if you guys would work on that along with Congress. But I do want to say that Democrats could have done this a long time ago. They have fought like hell for the drug companies, and they knew they were doing the wrong thing. And it's going to be very hard. I was just telling the leader and the speaker that it's going to be very hard for the Democrats to vote against the one big, beautiful deal. The greatest tax cuts in history, greatest everything, but now you have the big drug prices because that's going to be included. It makes that whole situation different from a scoring standpoint. I just told them, I called them up about this. I said, I'm going to do something that's going to be very monumental, and you're going to be scoring. You better tell your people that this is going to score really well. And then add hundreds of billions of dollars in tariffs to your list also. But as big as the tariffs are, this is something that really hits quickly. 5 years ago, I signed an executive order to confront this disaster, but only confront it in a minor way. It was a good confrontation, but never to this extent. And it took people a little while to understand a very complicated system. But Joe Biden, without any knowledge of what he was doing, terminated the policy and then pretended to negotiate under a new system. And then you take a look, 5 out of the 10 drugs that he negotiated are now over 200% more expensive in America than the rest of the world, and far more expensive than when he even got involved. Much more expensive than when he got involved. Joe Biden's plan was as you know, because you wrote about it, you don't say it very loudly, but it was a very big failure, was his whole presidency. First, I'm directing the U.S. trade representatives and Department of Commerce to begin investigations into foreign nations that extort drug companies by blocking their products unless they accept bottom line and very low dollar amounts for their product, unfairly shifting the cost burden onto American patients. And we'll be taking a look at that very strongly. The biggest thing we're going to do is we're going to tell those countries, like those represented by the European Union, that, that game is up, sorry. And if they want to get cute, then they don't have to sell cars into the United States anymore. It's a very big subject. And they won't get cute, because I'll defend the drug companies from that standpoint. They were given a price by the European Unions and other countries. This is what you do. This is what we're going to pay. We're not going to pay any more. Let America pay the difference, because there was a big shortfall. Let America pay it. And that's what we did, but we're not doing it anymore. Next, my administration will secure what we're calling most favored nations drug pricing. The principle is simple. Whatever the lowest price paid for a drug in other developed countries, that is the price that Americans will pay. And we're using the term other developed countries because there are some countries that need some additional help, and that's fine. I think that's very good. Some prescription drug and pharmaceutical prices will be reduced almost immediately by 50 to 80 to 90%. Big Pharma will either abide by this principle voluntarily or will use the power of the federal government to ensure that we are paying the same price as other countries. To accelerate these price restrictions and reductions, my administration will also cut out the middlemen. We're going to totally cut out the famous middlemen. Nobody knows who they are, middlemen. I've been hearing the term for 25 years, middlemen. I don't know who they are, but they're rich. That I can tell you. We're going to cut out the middlemen and facilitate the direct sale of drugs at the most favored nation price directly to the American citizen. So we're cutting out, Bobby, the middlemen. It's so important, right? You got to do that. They're worse than the drug companies. They don't even make a product, and they make a fortune.
And if you look at these numbers, they actually reflect how much on top of the most favored nation price was being paid by the United States. So the closest to me, Bob, you can point to the Jardines, the closest one, 289%, the one that's closest to you. That means that we are paying in America 4 times more than that drug costs in other countries. Again, 100% is the baseline. It's 289% above that baseline. It goes all the way down to when we're paying 50% more than any other country. That's the range. Yep.
So I teach economics at Stanford as well as health policy. And one thing that's really, really simple in economics is that when you have a persistent price difference for the same product between 2 countries, there is something deeply wrong. And what President Trump has done is a historic measure that should have been done a long time ago. What we're going to do is make sure that those prices become much closer to equal, like a competitive market you'd expect.
I've been a surgical oncologist at Johns Hopkins for 22 years, and I have seen patients suffer. We didn't take an oath to heal patients and then watch their life get ruined financially with their home, mortgage, retirement, going down the drain with GoFundMe campaigns, raising money from church communities and synagogues and friends they haven't seen in 20 years to try to raise money for what? For a system where Americans have been getting ripped off by 10, 12, 15 times higher prices than we see in other countries?
This is an issue that, I grew up in the Democratic Party, and every major Democratic leader for 20 years has been making this promise to the American people. This was the fulcrum of Bernie Sanders' runs for presidency, that he was going to eliminate this discrepancy between Europe and the United States. But as it turns out, none of them were doing it. It's one of these promises that politicians make to their constituents, knowing that they'll never have to do it. And the reason they'll never have to do it is because they know that Congress is controlled in so many ways by the pharmaceutical industry. There's at least one pharmaceutical lobbyist for every congressman, every senator on Capitol Hill, and every member of the Supreme Court. By some estimates, 3. Pharmaceutical companies, the industry itself spends 3 times what the next largest lobbyist spends on lobbying. So this was an issue that people talked about, but nobody wanted to do anything because it was radioactive. They knew you couldn't get it by Congress. We now have a president who is a man of his word, who has the courage. President Trump was taking money from the pharmaceutical industry too. I think they gave you $100 million. Yeah. But he can't be bought, unlike most of the politicians in this country. And he is standing here for the American people. I don't know what, there's writers like Lord Elizabeth Warren or Robert Reich who are saying that President Trump is on this side of the oligarchs. There has never been a president more willing to stand up to the oligarchs than President Donald Trump. And I'm very, very proud of you, Mr. President, for your courage, I'll say, because I don't want to be crude, your intestinal fortitude, your stiff spine, and your willingness to stand up for the American people. We have 4.2% of the world's population. Our country represents 75% of the revenues for pharmaceutical companies. We spend in our country $1,126 per capita on drugs. In Britain, they spend about $240. They spend 1/5 of what we do. And this is true across Europe.
Thank you, Secretary Kennedy. This is the most powerful executive order on pharmacy pricing and healthcare ever in the history of our nation. And it's only happening because we have a president with the fortitude, the guts to stand up to the withering criticism and lobbying that's going to occur as soon as folks hear about the executive order. So on behalf of the child in Philadelphia who's got an autoimmune disease with a $1,000 a month drug, or the older woman in Los Angeles who's on a blood thinner who can't afford her copay, I want to thank President Trump. God bless you for having the guts to take on this industry. Thank you, sir.